Hello, everyone. Welcome to Innovate Extreme. Today, I have Dave Westrom with us, who has written a book on GTM strategy for industrial software. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, Dave, I know that you have been in this domain for a long, more than 30 years back. But you have been in sales and you have see mergers like SAP MI and Lighthammer and ThingWorks and PTC. So can you tell us our uh, listeners that what you have been doing for last 30 years?
Yes, I'll try to just give a brief bio. I've spent most of my career in, as you mentioned, sales, business development, marketing, strategy, executive management positions, both full-time and fractional, for a range of industrial software and systems companies. I started my career with General Electric a long time ago. I was a mechanical engineering degree major out of school, but I guess realized that I wasn't crazy about engineering, so I got into sales and marketing through GE and found that that was something I was drawn to, and I've spent most of my career there. I've worked with both large companies and many startups through either direct as an advisor. I've worked with investors that have worked with these companies. So I've spent most of my career with smaller companies, what I like to call early stage industrial software companies. And the book that I wrote is entitled Industrial Software to Market, a go-to-market guide for early stage industrial software companies. And it really is an attempt to capture that experience and knowledge and put it in a format that others can use. So my experience includes, as you mentioned, a number of startup early stage companies that exited, including Lighthammer, which was acquired by SAP, a company earlier than that, a company called Soft Systems Engineering, which was acquired by, at that time, Wonderware, which is now Aviva Schneider, and more recently, ThingWorks, which was an industrial IoT pioneer that was acquired by PTC. So that's a background.
Yeah, Dave, that's pretty exciting career. So, what attracted you to this field? It's a niche field, industrial software. So, what attracted you, and what changes you have seen over the years about the software that is sold here?
Well, it has grown and expanded substantially. Um, Back when I started, there were control systems and there were software associated with the systems, but it was pretty much sold as a system. It was a large purchase package that companies acquired to run control systems or other aspects within their manufacturing plants. But you fast forward today, and there are many categories of different industrial software types that address different types of opportunities and problems, um, and, uh, and many companies and many opportunities. So that requires different strategies, different go-to-market plans, different types of resources. And so the complexity has evolved as well. And, in which back a long time ago, there are a few options. Now there's many options and choices. And understanding that complexity is challenging, especially in industrial software. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, actually, it's a quite an extensive area that we can we can expect hours to speak on it. So
Yeah.
I have read your book, and actually, it's quite insightful. Actually, I believe that it came at the right time because many industrial software company are trying to have a GTM strategy. And what inspired you to write your book, and what key messages do you want reader to take away from it?
Yeah, I think that as I have had more interaction and engagement with more startup companies, and a lot of this just built up over time, um, that there was just seemed to be confusion around a lot of the components of a go-to-market plan, but also just the overall process and structure of putting together a go-to-market plan. And even in my own mind, I had a lot of the components in my head, and again, based on a lot of experience, but just in terms of organizing those and putting them in a logical manner and creating a template so that it could help other people organize and also create a winning go-to-market plan. That was the part that I struggled with. So, is the process for building a go-to-market plan, is it a linear process? Is it, you do this first, then you do this, then you do this? Um, well, that depends. It depends on where you're starting in the process, how you got there, and so sorting that out was a challenge. It was a challenge for me, and really what I came up with was that certainly it's not linear. And in the book, I ended up drawing a visual, which isn't very pretty because I'm not a good artist, but it's more of all of these things are interconnected, and depending on where you start, you could really start with any of them. So I came up with an order. It's more of again, the visual is a circle with circles embedded in it. But what I found was when I created the content and started organizing the layout of the book, um, I ended up rearranging the order of a lot of the chapters because, again, it's what order do you present them in? And depending on where you are and where you're starting, you could really start at any point. So, I could go back and actually rearrange the order of the chapters and the various go-to-market model components. Um, and it would still work for some, but getting that whole process organized in one's mind, and then the other thing was, I think there's just misconceptions out there that I ran into, and probably the biggest one is just categorizing one's product. And there's
Yeah.
confusion around, if you're an industrial software company, what are you selling? What's your product? And is it an application? Is it a solution? Is it a tool? Is it a platform? And a lot of these terms are just thrown out and used interchangeably. And they're very important because if you don't understand what those terms mean, and you haven't correctly categorized your industrial software product, you're going to have problems across the entire rest of the go-to-market plan. You're going to be misaligned in your plan because there are distinct differences between these. And depending on how your product's categorized, it affects your marketing, your ideal customer profile, the type of salespeople you're going to want to hire, everything. So, these are the kinds of things that I thought were important, and a couple of the areas, just a few of the areas that are really drivers and highlights of what's in the book.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. So, coming to the sales part in the industrial software, so industrial software as sales used to be, and now also it is very relationship driven. That's you have emphasized in the book also. With the rise of digital transformation, has the role of salesperson evolved?
I think that I think with the number of different products and product types and options out there, there are different types of salespeople, and that's really what I tried to emphasize in the book, that companies need to hire the right type of salesperson that aligns with the type of product they're trying to bring to market. And it's not that and I titled that chapter the sales model, dogs, cats, and tigers. And the point in the title of that chapter is that dogs, cats, and tigers, they're different animals. They're just they're just
Hmm.
different.
Yeah.
It's not that the one's better than the other, or
Mhm.
it's just different. And depending on what you're trying to accomplish and what you're trying to sell, um, you may need a different type of salesperson. So the alignment is critical. And so for example that I talk about in the book, tactical salespeople are different than value sellers, and understanding the requirements and the differences, and the alignment again with your product and your unique value proposition. Um, those are the kinds of things that need to be understood in order to select the right salesperson for your organization. It's not just a matter of, oh, let's just go find a good salesperson. And I think that's where a lot of companies start. It's, oh, we need to go hire salespeople. Let's find a good salesperson. Well, you can find a salesperson who's very good at selling one type of product, but may not be so good at selling a different type of product. And that's where the challenge is.
Okay, so, what are the some of the biggest challenges sales professional face today when selling industrial software?
Well, I think that again, it starts with understanding the product and the value proposition. Um, and the value proposition may be as simple as, I'm the least expensive option on the market, um, or it may be something more complex, like I'm providing functionality that isn't available. I'm providing something unique that drives value for you, the customer. It may be, my product is higher quality. Well, what does that mean? And how does that translate into impact on the customer's business? And how do you quantify that? So, so looking at these items, understanding them, and then talk a lot in the book about value selling. And a value seller is always looking to answer the question, how much money is my product making for my customer? And ultimately, it's that amount of impact, the quantified value of the product for the customer, that's what's going to drive the customer's buying decision. If it, how much money is the product going to make for me, the customer, and what is my risk associated in attaining that value? And then, most importantly, how does that compare to other initiatives that I may be evaluating? So, that's something that is discussed and highlighted in the book, is that, oftentimes companies are comparing themselves and their products to other companies and other products. That is what they view as their quote unquote competition. When in reality, it's, often you're competing with other initiatives. The customer has a certain amount of money to spend, and they're trying to decide, what do I spend it on? Should I spend it on what you're trying to sell me, or should I spend it on something totally different that that might make more money for me? So ultimately, the prioritization comes back to the impact, and the competition necessarily isn't another product in your space, but it may be something totally different that the customer will perceive or not to perceive will drive more value for their business. So that's what, these are the kinds of things that make this complicated and challenging. And then the perception of value is also key, because often that isn't objective. It's subjective, and it may be driven by things like a personal agenda within the customer organization. So there's a lot of factors there.
Yeah. Yeah, in you talked about dynamics also, in the customer landscape. So what we have as a in a generalist situation, what I take away from here is that we have to understand the processes of customer also to provide them the best value if we are trying to pitch a software. So there should be a discovery call. Whether I am correct, or do you want to put on something here?
Well, yeah, you need to understand what the customer's uh, opportunities, challenges,
Mhm.
what would drive the customer to have interest in your product, and ultimately what would drive them to purchase your product. And that's the foundation, as you just stated, for qualifying an opportunity. And it should be done in the context of again, not necessarily that the customer could be evaluating you versus other people you think you might compete with, but that they're going to evaluate you against other initiatives. And the truth is, one of the other items in the book, really around the strategy that drives the go-to-market plan, is, what is your unique value proposition as a company and as a product? What makes what you have unique? And
Okay.
if you can articulate that and you truly believe it,
Mhm.
the next question I ask is, do you really have competition, or who is your
Mhm.
competition? Um, if you have something that's truly unique, then by extension of that, you really don't have competition. Um, which leads to what I said a few moments ago. The real competition is, uh, the customer may want to do it themselves. The customer has other initiatives, other things they can spend money on. There's other areas, and when you start looking at the customer from that perspective, um, from a sales perspective, it broadens what you need to look for and what you need to think about throughout a sales process, especially when you're selling to larger accounts, because that's when you start getting into organizational dynamics, politics, all the other things that drive large accounts.
Yeah. So, coming to the organization part, many organizations struggle with long sales cycle in industrial software. So, what they can do, what strategies they can employ to get things done faster?
Well, I think that ultimately there's a number of facets to that question. Reducing the sales cycle. Um, the first question is, what is the sales cycle? And again, depending on what you're selling and who you're selling to, and what type of sale, you might have a different answer to that, right? If you're selling an application or a platform into a large enterprise account, the sales cycle is potentially going to be longer depending on how you define the sale. The first order may not be the sale. That is a step along the way of a broader goal and objective, which is ownership of the account, which is having the account standardize and rolling out your application or your platform across their enterprise. So in terms of reducing that sales cycle, again, I think it's about focus, in terms of focusing on the problem, but focusing also on the value and getting to value as quickly as possible. So if your product is designed and structured in a way where the amount of time to implement it, the amount of friction involved in implementation and getting to initial value, if that's reduced, the quicker you can get to value in that instance I just described, and where you can get to value, quantify it, and get the customer to agree on the value that's delivered, the faster to a rollout or to a deployment. If you're selling to small to mid-size, then I think it may be more of a tactical sale, and that's where the sales process and having a very structured sales process and a very efficient sales process comes more into play. Where if there's a very well-defined outcome for your product and how you get to that outcome, that will help accelerate a sales process in that instance. But again, there's a lot of variables: size of the
Yeah.
account, maturity of the market,
Mhm.
value. I could go on and on.
Yeah. Yeah, there are multiple facets. I got where I'm coming from. So, but today we see that a lot of technical people are active on LinkedIn and YouTube and Instagram and trying to create contents. So, how has the role of thought leadership and content marketing changed the sales process? Do customer now expect sales professional to be more consultative?
Yeah, I think they expect them to be more consultative, but I think that there's also, um, again, not to repeat myself, but there's also so many options out there that it's
Hmm.
it's it's confusing. um, and content and websites, the things that you have to market your company and your product, um, because software is highly technical and there is so many options. The result is a lot of confusion. So, how do you stand out in that? And
Okay.
I had one of the in one of my previous roles, one of the uh, owners of of one of the distributors that I worked with. I'd write a white paper, or we'd put something new out, and I'd be excited. I'd call him up and say, "Hey, did you see this? We just published such and such." And he would say to me, he'd say, Dave, your stuff all sounds the same. Sounds the same as everyone else. You use the
Yeah.
same buzzwords, same buzzwords, same, it just all sounds the same to me, right?
Yeah.
And when you step back, you realize that, he's right. There's just so much out there that
Too
it's,
much noise.
yeah, and you could pick any one of these categories. I mean, you could, SCADA, MES, ERP, work instruction, connected worker, on and on and on. And there's just tons of stuff out there. So again, it's, how do you stand out? How can you create content? What vehicles do you use to get that content out there, and to do it in such a way where you can clearly articulate your unique value proposition in a way that people can understand. And in the book, I talk about the need for, an elevator pitch and can you explain in under a minute what your product is and why it's different, and can you do it in a way that you're as if you're talking to a fifth grader in an elevator, or you're at I don't know, a party or something with a bunch of people,
Yeah. Hmm.
where they're going to understand it, not a highly technical software developer, but just someone that is, a normal person that maybe doesn't have an engineering degree, or works in a manufacturing plant, right? How are they going to understand what you're selling, with,
Hmm.
again, with all of the technical components, the options, the buzzwords, everything else? It's confusing, and it's a challenge.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, there is too much noise out there, and most of the technical people are suffering with thirst of knowledge. So, what they think that whatever they have understood is obvious to the customer also, but that is not the case. Customers are mostly non-technical. That's why they are coming to technical people like us to create value from our products.
Well, yes, and understand that technical people like to talk to technical people, and
Hmm.
oftentimes you have technical people in IT organizations and plants and operational whatever, right? But ultimately, they report up to someone who's a business person, and
Yeah.
who's responsible for money, and
Yeah.
and often it's those people want to cut through all the technical stuff, and it's like, how much money is this going to make? How is this going to impact my business? How much money is it going to make? And if it is a lot of money, what's my risk in achieving that? I mean, and I've told companies I've worked for, people I've advised, that I've often heard the phrase, "Oh, the customer loves us." Customer just absolutely loves us, and it's like, well, that's great. The guy you're working with at the plant loves you, and maybe you go out to lunch every other week or whatever. But at the end of the day, if you're going to roll your product out across that plant, and then across multiple plants and across the organization, that guy that loves you is going to have to go up to his boss, and probably his boss's boss, and other people, and sell this, or you're going to have to sell it. Better yet, you don't. Number one rule in sales is never let someone else do your selling for you. But you're going to have to make a business case. you're going to have to explain in terms that those people can understand. What's the value? What's the impact of your product? How much money does it make them? And why should they roll it out? And just because someone likes you or the technical guy likes you or whatever, that's not going to cut it when you get to that point.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, enough like about sales. Now we can get some insights from your book also. Your book speaks about GTM for industrial software. What was the most surprising insight you uncovered while writing it? Was there anything that that came as an epiphany to you while writing the book, or it was all your experience uh, given in the book?
Yeah, again, I think the epiphany for me was just the challenge of organizing it into a
Mhm.
template that could
Okay,
be,
okay, yeah.
creating the structure of the template that could be useful. The content wasn't that challenging. I think sometimes the biggest challenge in writing a book isn't writing it, it's marketing it, but that's a different subject for a different discussion. But um,
Yeah.
but no, I would say that for me, the epiphany was just, what are the components of a go-to-market plan and how do you organize them? And I wasn't able to, before I wrote the book, I did some research and I wasn't able to find anything that
Yes.
that
Yes.
really, I mean, a lot of people said, "Oh, you should write a book on sales." And I was like, "Well, there's tons of sales books out there, sales training, sales. There's a million of sales books out there, and a lot of them are really, really good, right?" But when I look to find, okay, if I'm creating a strategy and a go-to-market plan, and specifically for an industrial software company, is there anything out there that lays out a process and a template for to create that, and also takes into account that I might be starting from a different position, because you know not everyone, or very few companies are thinking about this very, very early on, where they're, oh, I've got an idea for a product. Now, before I go build the product or do anything else, let me put together a strategy and a go-to-market plan. No, that's that's just not how it works, right? So, companies are starting at different points. And again, how is that organized? What's the process? How do you create a template for going through and building such a plan? And what are the components of that? I couldn't even find that. So that's what I really tried to create and lay out in this book. And I also tried to do it in a manner that was easy to consume. And also, my other rule about writing books is I try to keep it under 3 hours, because I believe that, you know, reading a book is an investment in time, and
Yeah.
you should be able to be succinct and make your point, and not not expect that someone's going to need to spend 10 hours reading your book. So I try to keep it at under 3 hours. Can you read this book and capture the information and the key points in a period of time that respects the reader's time and the value of their time?
Yeah, actually, it's a good weekend read. Actually, I finished it on a weekend, and it was approximately 3 hours on my Kindle.
Good. That was the goal. So,
So, what's one thing that you think that can be useful for sales professional in this industry that they can take away from your book?
I think there's quite a few things, but I think it's
Yeah.
it's understanding. I think it should help salespeople just in terms of what type of salesperson are they, and hopefully if within their company or even outside of their company when they're looking for opportunities, um, the kind of products that might best align to their skills. Um, I think more specifically, there are items in the book and some stories that I tell that just based on things that I've learned. And one of those, just as a quick example, I learned very early on in my career, and this goes against what you're taught as an engineer. But what I learned is that value quantification is subjective, um, versus being totally objective, which is what I was sort of taught in school and what I think people believe. I mean, um, perception's everything, and whatever a customer perceives is reality, and that can be shaped, that can be molded by a good salesperson. And early on in my career, I had a job where I was responsible for um, quantifying value of a product and putting it in a report and presenting it to a customer. And what I learned was that there's different ways of quantifying value, and it can affect different parts of the business. There may be things that overlap. There may be there can be lots of components of that. And at the end of the day, it's what is the customer willing to accept and believe? And often a customer's not gonna share a lot of things with you for a number of reasons. In terms of baselining and quantifying a value proposition. So, you'll have to do it, and you have to make assumptions. But what I've found, at least from a value selling standpoint, is, you've got to make that attempt. And even if you're making assumptions, put those assumptions down, go back to the customer, and just basically say, hey, here is what the value of our product is. Here's how much money it's making you. And often the customer's not going to agree. I've been in meetings where I've made statements about value and have had customers slam their fist on the table, tell me I'm crazy, this and that. But the one thing that always happens is when you walk out of that meeting, if the customer isn't aligned or on value quantification, after you leave that meeting, they're going to go back and they're going to figure out what the value is.
Yeah.
And in most cases with industrial software, the value opportunity is significantly higher than the cost of the software. So, if the product is, especially in newer markets, if it's something that emerging markets where you really have to examine value attainment, you got to have that discipline where you can go in and at least attempt to quantify and present what you believe the value is. And again, it's an opportunity, but it's a challenge because there's many ways of quantifying something. Is it cost reduction driven? Is it, or on the other extreme, is it, can you make a case that you're going to impact the market share of a company? If I can convince you that my product is going to help you increase market share by 0.5%, the dollars tied to that are going to be huge, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
these are the things that you have to align around if you're a value seller. But again, value selling is different than tactical selling. It's different than strategic selling. So different types of salespeople, cats, dogs, and tigers. So
Yeah, yeah. So, in your book, you have written about many experience about your sales cycle, about the deals. So, you have likely seen many deals won and likely lost some too. Is there a deal or saleswoman that stand out as a defining learning experience for you? Something, are you able to recall something that is not there in the book?
um, there's quite a few deals. I would say there are a few without going into specifics that I was on both sides of, but they are demonstrations or examples of sales situations where a company and a salesperson in particular has complete control and ownership of the account. And I mentioned this briefly in the book, but it's really especially at larger accounts with complex organizations where there's a lot of politics. I've seen and worked with salespeople. I've managed accounts myself, and also a couple of times have been on the other end of this, where um, there is such a strong ownership position in the account that the salesperson is able to drive a sales situation where competition actually believes they are going to win the business and expends a huge amount of effort and resources into attempting to win that business. But at the very end, at the very last minute, finds out, realizes, and understands that they never had a chance. Um, so the ultimate example of account control from a sales situation is just that. Being able to not only win the business and own the account, but being able to do so in such a way that the competition expends the most amount of resources to the point where ultimately at the end they just that what I just described only happens once or twice, and then they just drop out, and then there's no competition until either there's you know a major organizational change. There's a reorg in the company that the customer's company that sort of reshuffles the deck and everything starts over, or there's a major technology shift that changes things, and you get new entrants and new opportunities and new value propositions. But and obviously what I just suggested happens quite often in software, especially industrial software. Things do change quick, but that's to me that's the peak example of being in a position where you own and can control an account.
So, coming to the technology shift. So, what do you think, like, future of sales professional will look like in 5 to 10 years with AI and automation becoming more prevalent? I believe that that relationship part will always be there, but will there be any roles or part of the sales cycle that will be automated?
Um, I think that I guess first of all, I think AI is going to be a huge disruptor in software. Um,
Yes.
and there's going to be dramatic change in the next 5 to 10 years, a dramatic change. Um, and I'm already seeing things with companies that I advise, some stealth startups that I'm working with. It's some of it's scary. I mean, there are going to be categories of software wiped out. um, there's there may be layers of software that are effectively eliminated. There's going to be, to me, there's going to be dramatic disruption and change. As far as sales go, uh, I think we're always going to need, you're always going to need to sell. You're always going to need salespeople. I do talk in the book about product-led growth as a, what that means, how that's viewed from a sales standpoint and a marketing standpoint. So that's in there, which again, I think there's some pros and cons to that. But I think you're always going to need salespeople. Where I think that there's going to be perhaps more disruption is on the marketing side, because there's so many things that we're seeing already that these new technologies are able to automate. I mean, even recently, some of the stuff that Google has released, where you can take a presentation or a paper or whatever, and put it into that, and out will pop a podcast or an explainer video or or anything, right?
Yeah.
It's incredible. It's actually really good, and that technology is evolving very quickly. So I mean, just what I just said is explainer videos for marketing. Do you and heck, within a year, you'll probably just be able to bang one of those out yourself in a matter of minutes with the with the verbiage, the video content, everything. So I think the impact on marketing is going to be significant in a number of areas. Sales is I mean, there will be impact there as well, but again, I think you're always going to need salespeople.
Yeah.
There's a human element to it as well, in terms of
Yes. Exactly.
again, what I talk about in the book around, especially with larger accounts, and again, decisions are subjective and are driven by sometimes there are political drivers within a customer account. So there's always going to be a need for a human element.
Yes. So, coming to your book, like, where can listeners get your book? How can they connect with you?
I am on LinkedIn, David Westrom. You can find me there. The book is available globally on the Amazon platform. So you can go on Amazon and type in industrial software to market, and it should pop up. It's there's an e-version, a soft cover, and a hard cover. Most people just download the e-version. It is now, I believe it is now available on all of the Amazon platforms globally.
Yes.
There are a couple of other publishing platforms that it is available on or will be available on. Also, Barnes and Noble is one. Google is, I think, will be shortly. So there are others that it will come out on, but Amazon is usually the easiest just to get
Yeah.
it, and that's where you can find it.
So coming to the end of our discussion, do you have anything you want to say to our listeners through your experience?
Um, no, I think it's for startup and early stage industrial software companies, um, planning, go-to-market planning, strategy. You know, the strategy is a foundation of a plan, and having a plan is critical. So, you know, having clarity around what you're selling and what your unique value proposition is, categorizing that properly, building out a complete go-to-market plan, and continuously reviewing that plan, testing it, updating it, because the market changes and it changes rapidly. And you know, even even the discussion we had around salespeople, right? As the market evolves and product categories mature, you know, the sales resources and other components of that plan may need to change over time. So this is something that should be dynamic and continuous, not just something where, oh, I'm going to go create a go-to-market plan and then file it somewhere. It's something you really want to think about continuously, because startups and early stage companies can't afford to get it wrong. I mean, you know, industrial software, it's a race. You're in a race, and you can't afford to get it wrong, because it not only costs you money, but it costs you time. And that's the most important thing, is the loss of time, because you're in a race to establish a position in the market. The bigger companies, the large industrial software conglomerates, the enterprise software companies, um, they just have to get it right every once in a while. And I talk about that in the book as well, right? But you know,
Yeah.
if you're a smaller company, uh, you know, you've got to get this right. So that would be my final thought or advice.
Thank you, Dave, for your time today. And it was really a pleasure talking to you and understanding your perspective regarding the sales. And I believe that it was quite useful, and I hope my listeners will feel the same. Thank you and have a nice day.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. Much appreciated.
So, Dave,